On today's episode of Locked On Wild, John Hynes said it was a step in the right direction against Chicago. Well, at least for two periods.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, we are your team each and every day. And we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we bring back the wildly popular Three Things recap from John Hynes himself. Three key topics to take away from his post-game availability after a 4-2 win over the Chicago Blackhawks. So let's dive right into it because we talked about it on the post-game last night, and the everydayers who tuned in last night and who interacted in yet another postcast. Well, no, I was none too pleased with what happened at the end of that game because I guess of how bad Chicago looked early on. And it was one part the Minnesota Wild playing better at the start of the game. It was also Chicago being just hilariously inept at even entering the offensive zone. And basically you could put the Benny Hill theme in the background anytime Chicago possessed the puck because you were likely going to find something equal parts hilarious and equal parts astoundingly bad. So for two periods, the Minnesota Wild held Chicago to a total of 5 shots, including just one in the first period. They did an outstanding job of bottling up an offense and a team that really has nothing to play for, and a team that has already seen one of their key pieces, Taylor Hall, shipped elsewhere. Definitely could sense a little bit of that missing from Chicago's lineup. But it all changed in the third period when Chicago scored on a power play a minute into the third period, and they went on the offensive for basically the entire rest of the third. We'll talk more about that coming up here in a little bit, but the first thing that John Hynes talked about at length in his post-game availability was the importance for something that we have spent a lot of time talking about for the Minnesota Wild this year, and that is a hot start.
Team and the win, the first 40 minutes had to be exactly what you were hoping to get.
Yeah, I thought we were much more focused, I think, to start the game. The competitive level, I think the contributions throughout the lineup was good. And, I think, and going into the game, we said there's going to be some, just because there's two teams that are going to try to win, there's going to be surges and pushes in the game. And obviously that came in the third period. But, the key is to find ways to win is what we talked about. So I think a step in the right direction in a multitude of areas. And now we got to keep building on it.
And this goes to something that you heard me and Alex talk about earlier today in our first episode of the day is, this notion of choosing your hard. It is not easy to be the team that goes on the offensive and takes the momentum, gets that first goal, gets those first big shot attempts. That kind of stuff isn't easy, but it's uber important. We've underscored the records for the Minnesota Wild so far this year. If you factor in both home and road, the Minnesota Wild are 28-2 when they score first. When the opposing team scores first, the Wild are 9-9-2. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be the Wild scoring first. when the Wild handle the action, when they outshoot their opponents in the first period, for the game, excuse me. When they outshoot their opponent for the game, they're 13-3-2. When they get outshot, they're 15-14-2. So these aren't just little dips, like little fluctuations in performance. You're talking drastic differences between how this team plays when they have a lead and how this team plays when they have to try to come from behind. And this isn't rocket science. This isn't anything new. This is a Wild team that's built on playing stifling defense. So you are trying to win games 2-1 as opposed to trying to win games 4-3. They're just built to get an early lead and to suffocate the opponent and limit the chances that the opponent gets to try to get that equalizer goal. After one period on the season, when the Minnesota Wild lead, they're 16-2-1. When they trail after one period, they are 6-9-1. When they're tied after one period, 7-6-2. Large disparities. Again, these aren't just little fluctuations. When the Minnesota Wild lead after two periods, they are 18-0-0. When they trail after two periods, they're 3-11-2. When they're tied after two periods, they're 8-6-2. Get the early lead and limit the chances of the opponent. That's the mantra. That's the MO for this team. That is how they make their money. That's how they are built. They're not built to keep it close and maybe come from a 1-goal deficit. They are built to be taking a lead into the second and the third period, and you get a lead in the first, you build on it in the second, and you send the other team home empty-handed in the third. That's the formula. It's the blueprint that John Hynes laid out there at the beginning of the season. The Wild have done that on the road. We talked about the scoring splits in last night's postcast. The Minnesota Wilds have outscored their opponents on the road 84-64. That includes +9 in the first period, +6 in the second, and +6 in the third. So they are grabbing that early lead. They are adding to it, or at least keeping it where it was. And in the third, they're doing the same thing. At home, 79 opponent goals, 62 for the Minnesota Wild. And the best period they have from a goals department is -5 in the first. They are -8 in the second, and they're -7 in the third. So we've talked at length about why there's such a disparity between the home and the road splits, but just look at the score first and hold the lead splits. That's the bigger prize. That's the bigger prize to be had for the Minnesota Wild this year, and that comes from strong starts, consistency in being ready to go from puck drop so that you can get into your mode of attack, your mode of play, by limiting your opponent's chances, by suffocating the life out of their offense, as opposed to having to try to rev yours up to keep pace. And they added another notch to that belt by scoring first last night. Just got to figure out a way to consistently do that at home. They have only led after one period in 5 of their home games so far this year. and they are 7-7 at home when scoring first. That's not great. It's not great, Bob. Not great. But Hynes is right. Strong starts and a step in the right direction. But I'm glad he used the phrase a step in the right direction, because that third period was definitely, I'm going to put it in cruise and shut my eyes and just hope that the car is still on the road when I wake up and is at the destination, even though self-driving cars do not largely exist. And that kind of felt like what happened against Chicago yesterday. So thankfully it didn't lead to a loss, but it led to some unnecessary nail-biter moments. But we talked about that at length with Alex, and I'm sure we'll discuss that more here as the week unfolds. But we'll piggyback off of the strong start to consistency throughout the game. That is another big key for this team, is just being able to sustain a performance throughout the course of the game, as opposed to having it apply to stretches. We'll talk about that as we continue our recap of last night's game against Chicago with our 3 things from John Hynes. That's on the way as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet to potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Again, a reminder, we got our live show coming up for you tonight at 8. Denny has a full platter ready to rock for you. You are not going to want to miss his thoughts on where the team is currently at, and more importantly, where the heck they need to get to as the season unfolds. So make sure to tune in tonight, 8 p.m. right here on YouTube. Continuing our 3 things recap of the game last night against Chicago. We talked about strong starts, something that has been few and far in between at home, has been pretty consistent on the road, to say the least, but it just isn't something that we have seen a lot of so far at home. Another thing that has been kind of a black eye over the last few weeks is games that feature either just a hideous start and a comeback that comes up just short, or a hot start that fizzles. Consistency, consistency, consistency. If John Hynes could say the word consistency anymore, he would have copyrighted it.
I'm just talking to Bill a bit before the game. He, like you, has not been happy with the energy level and just the hardness lately. I mean, do you feel like the way you played in the first 2 periods could be a catalyst to push this forward, or is this going to be a process still?
No, I think it's there. We just got to make sure that that commitment level is there, and talking with the players about what does it mean, the importance of these games going up until the break, where we're at in the season. This is one of the harder parts of the season, and it requires energy, and it requires pushing through certain things. And it was nice to see that we found the energy tonight on a back-to-back to be able to do that. Now, what we're really looking for with it is consistency. I think even the other nights I said we've had it in pockets, but we haven't had it consistent enough to win the game. And tonight we found a way to do that, and I think that'll be our objective here going on to this road trip, is that consistency and reliability in our game, and the willingness and the commitment to do it night in and night out, shift in and shift out.
Choose your hard. It is hard to win games at the NHL level. It is also hard to muster up the extra that it requires to win games at the NHL level. So you get this from John Hynes, and I bring it up because it has been for quite a long portion of the season the rallying cry for this team. Choose your hard. You've got the hard chain after games, rewarding the extra efforts and the things that it takes, the things that are required to win games at this level consistently. If you don't do them, your chances of winning are much less than if you simply take the time to do the extra and to lay your body on the line, or to, dive for a loose puck, or to actually go battle along the boards for a loose puck. All of those things require extra effort. It's easy enough to just dump a puck in, and instead of pursuing it, to just leave it for the next person, to just say, well, it wasn't likely that I was going to get there first anyway, so I will just dump it in and head off on a change, or I'll just hang back and wait for the next play to materialize. Like, that's the easy way out. That's the easy road out. And Hynes was very pointed earlier over the weekend. We read the audio for you with Alex earlier today, and just very pointed in his assessment of where this team is at, and that there's no commitment fully to the things that are required to win the games, to stick your foot out to block a shot, or to throw a hit at an opponent. Those things that, by and large, players don't like to do as much because, it doesn't feel great. You wake up and you do not feel good the next day. But it's all the stuff that is absolutely required of winning games. And it's up and down the facets of the game, whether it be forechecking, backchecking, passing. All of these things require a little extra precision. And if you're off, if you're not doing those things in a full manner, it's noticeable, and that's where other teams take advantage. But you can think of a game too as a tug of rope, tug of war, and you're not going to have full control of the rope the entire time. Think about it. You put a lot of effort in to try to pull the rope over to your side of the pond or whatever is in the middle. You're going to exert a lot of energy, and unless you get full commitment from everybody on your team to where you can pull that other team across the line before they get a chance to do that themselves, then maybe you do win a bunch. But it is all about the give and the take. And it's all about being able to weather a little bit of a push from an opponent and not let it turn into just like taking over the game. That's the kind of thing that can lead to games that look to be well in hand just completely falling off the rails. The Chicago game was a good example of that. That third period power play goal by Chicago within the first minute, it led to a few other power play opportunities in the third, and it led to this feeling of, hey, this game is far from over. a game in which Chicago managed 5 shots through the first 2 periods. Those are games that you have to put in the extra to take care of business, so you're not having to sweat that game down the stretch. That's why that was so frustrating. Is that was a game that just should never have gotten to that point. Sure, you give up that power play goal to start the third to make it 3-1, but then you buckle down and you get back at it, and maybe you get a separator again to make it 4-1. I feel like if the Wild would have found a way to get one more goal before Chicago made it 3-2, Chicago would have called off the Dogs. They're a team that's just looking for any reason to not be in these games. And the Wild just were very happy to oblige them the opportunity to stay in it. So consistency throughout the games in your approach, in your commitment level to doing the things that is necessary to come away with wins. And look, nobody loves blocking shots, but it's no coincidence that the teams that have the highest number of blocks are usually the teams that end up coming away with wins. The magic number for the Minnesota Wild this year has been the 20 block plateau. They have a very high chance of winning games if they can get to 20 blocks in a game. And it has nothing to do with the fact that they've got 20 blocks. Like, the number is inconsequential. But what the number signifies is the willingness to do what is necessary for the win. It's the Kirk Cousins quote after he signed with Atlanta. It's not about the money. It's about what the money represents. It's not about the block shots. It's about what the block shots represent, and that is an effort level and the consistency and approach to do what you need to do to come away with wins. That's what it takes, whether it be in game 1 or game 82. And if those things kind of dry up, those extra effort pieces of the game aren't crisp, aren't at full peak, then that's where the problems come in. That's where the demons start to crawl up out of the woodwork. And that's where the losing streaks happen. So not only the consistency in physicality and battle level in all of those things, but how about just having a plan with the passing and not trying to hit the home run every single time you have a puck to pass. That is another thing that John Hynes keyed in on in his post game, is just the crisp passing and the ability to fluently and quickly exit the zone. We'll talk about that to finish today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. One final segment of today's episode of Locked on Wild. And once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Reminder, at 8 p.m. tonight, we've got yet another live show coming up for you. Denny has a full list of items to get to. Should be a great time. We'll, of course, take your questions as well. 8 p.m. tonight on YouTube, the show that you all look forward to every single week, the one that everybody tunes into, 8 p.m. tonight on YouTube. So let's finish with just one more key notion that I thought was interesting from John Hynes, and it had to do with passing. Passing, intent to pass, purpose of passing. John Hynes is a big advocate of making sure that you're doing whatever you can to be clean in your zone exits.
What were you doing in the first 2 periods that really kept them from getting through the neutral zone?
I thought we moved the puck really well. I thought we played north with the puck, whether it was our breakouts or our neutral zone transition. We hunted pucks in the offensive zone. So that allowed us to play fast in a connected game. And then coming back the other way, we had really good gaps. Our back pressure was really strong. Like when we're playing our best hockey, we're connected in those areas, and then you don't have to play as much D-zone time, or it's not easy for teams to be able to come in and enter your zone and then check up and make all kind of plays. You can kind of set it up where we're a good breakout team. So if we can deny entry, that's number one. If they do, it's chips. Now we're going to breakout routes, and we try to be able to get up and out of the zone and then back on the attack.
Has Brodin and Johansson been skating back in Minnesota?
Johansson has, yes.
Okay. So do you maybe expect them to practice Tuesday?
I haven't talked to trainers about just because we were in the back-to-back, but I'll probably get more information on both of those players regarding Tuesday.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Little nugget about Marcus Johansson and Jonas Brodin thrown in there as well. But Hynes talks about it, we see this too. He's mentioned in stretches of play where the Wild seem to kind of fall off the rails, and has talked about how it seems like the team is playing way more east-west than they are north-south. And that comes from again, it's a details thing, and it is an effort thing of not wanting to do like the straight downhill, which is the easiest path to come away with goals in this league, is from point A to point B, putting yourself in position to quickly enter the zone, getting to the net, not having all of your shots be one and dones from the perimeter. These are all effort things. These are all detail-oriented things. These are the things that it takes to win. These are the things that nobody wants to do. But that's why they're so important, is if you spend all of your time on the perimeter, guess what? Your chances of scoring goals are very low, criminally low. If you can actually get to the net and can, if you can get to the net and you can actually, grab a rebound or two and find a way to push one past a hot goalie, that's when the effort gets rewarded. And that's when you end up being able to stack goals on tough goalies. But if every shot that you take is from the perimeter and it leads to a quick zone exit from your opponent, then guess what? You have to go right back on defense and you have to defend. That's what John Hynes is talking about here, is if the Wild try to do too much with their passing, they're trying to hit those home run plays. They're trying to lead to breakouts. They're trying to lead to odd man rushes and all the flashy things where you see the passes. The moment they leave their zone, they're trying for a pass all the way through the neutral zone to the other end of the ice to spring somebody for a single-digit percentage chance play. Whereas if they would simply take the time to hit 2 or 3 passes through the neutral zone while continuing to move forward, those are much harder to intercept as an opponent. Those stretch passes, those home run plays, pretty easy to defend as an opponent. You just get your stick on it and you're going to end up coming away with the puck. And the flashy stuff is, I think, the things that get amplified when this team starts to hit adversity. When things are going well for this Minnesota Wild squad, they tend to focus way more on just going north, straight downhill, hunting pucks offensively. When there's confidence there and there's confidence in what they're doing, they are looking at the puck and the puck only. But when the doubt starts to creep in, when the losses mount, you see everybody trying to make the hero play, the home run play, as opposed to just continuing to be part of the process. And it starts with those long stretch passes ahead. Just pass it to somebody who is in motion, leaving the zone, and you spend less time having to defend. You spend less time having to defend on your end of the ice if you can start to switch from all of those turnovers that happen in the Wild end of the ice or right at the top of the zone. If you're trying to do too much and you turn a puck over like that, right back to work defensively. So clean zone exits, passing with purpose, just having a plan with what you're going to do with the puck other than like, I'm just going to look for the home run play every time. How about you just look for somebody that is a little further up the ice than you? Simplify it down a little bit. But leaving the zone with purpose to eliminate all those instances in which the Wild gets stuck on their end of the ice, that's going to help out the offense as well. That's going to help out the defense as well. The longer you have to defend on your end of the ice, the higher the likelihood that the opponent is going to score a goal. Because the longer you're out on the ice, the more likely there are going to be mistakes made. So all of these little things, John Hynes has been harping on them since the season started, but he's right. We talked about it with Alex earlier today. John Hynes, the blueprint is there. The blueprint for this Minnesota Wild team to win games is there. It was there through the first almost 30 games of the season. The key is for this team to get back into it. It's not easy, which is why they have to choose their hard. And they have to choose the right way to pick up these wins as the season unfolds. That'll do it for today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to join us for the live show once again tonight, coming up at 8 p.m. right here on YouTube. Should be a good one, and we hope you will join us here this evening. And we hope that you as well will join us here throughout the rest of the week. We get a few extra episodes coming your way to finish things off this week. So make sure to join in on those as well. Make sure to leave a like on all of the episodes coming at you so you don't miss out on any new ones throughout the week as well. We have new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.